In the quiet village of St. Mary Mead, a rich man is found dead, shot in a locked room with no gun, no clues, and no way in or out. Everyone stumped. Police, detectives, even Scotland Yard. But Miss Marple, a sharp-eyed old lady with a knack for secrets, isn't fooled. With her knitting needles and keen mind, she unravels a web of debts, hidden tricks, and a shadowy villain called the Broker. From a burned note to a sneaky fireplace trap, she spots what no one else can. Will she catch the killer before they strike again? Dive into a mystery where nothing is impossible for Miss Marple. Chapter 1. The Village Whispers. The sun hung low over St. Mary Mead, painting the cottages in soft gold. It was the kind of quiet village where everyone knew everyone else's business, from who baked the best scones to who forgot to close their gate. But today the air felt heavy, like a storm was coming, though the sky was clear. People whispered in doorways and leaned over garden fences, their voices low and quick. Something awful had happened, and no one could make sense of it. Miss Jane Marple sat in her cosy sitting room, her knitting needles clicking like a steady heartbeat. She was a small, neat woman with sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. Her white hair was tucked into a bun, and her flowered dress was as tidy as her garden. She looked like any other old lady in the village, but those who knew her understood she had a mind sharper than a butcher's knife. She could spot a lie in a smile, or a secret in a glance. Right now she was knitting a scarf, but her ears were tuned to the chatter outside her open window. Her maid, Cherry, bustled in with a tea tray, her cheeks pink from hurrying. Cherry was young, with curly brown hair and a habit of talking fast when she was excited. Today she was practically bouncing. "Oh, Miss Marple, have you heard? It's dreadful. Mr. Hargrove's dead, found this morning in his big house up the hill. They're saying it's murder, but no one knows how it happened." Miss Marple's needles paused just for a moment. "Murder, Cherry? That's a strong word. Tell me what you know." Her voice was calm, like she was asking about the weather, but her eyes gleamed with interest. Cherry set the tray down, nearly sloshing the tea. "Well, I got it from Mrs. Price at the shop, who heard it from the milkman, who talked to the policeman's wife. Mr. Hargrove, old Cornelius, the one who never comes out, was found in his study, shot right through the heart. But here's the spooky part. The door was locked from the inside, the windows were bolted, and there wasn't a gun anywhere. The police are scratching their heads and folks are saying it's a ghost or some kind of magic." Miss Marple smiled faintly, pouring herself a cup of tea. "A ghost, Cherry? I doubt that. Ghosts don't carry pistols, and magic is just a trick we haven't figured out yet. What else did Mrs. Price say?" Cherry perched on the edge of a chair, her eyes wide. "They say Inspector Crane's up at the manor now, poking around with his men. He's a nice man, but he's not the cleverest, is he? Mrs. Price says even Scotland Yard's been called, and they're stumped too. No one can figure out how someone got in or out of that room. It's like the killer vanished into thin air." Miss Marple sipped her tea, her mind already turning. Cornelius Hargrove was a name she knew, though she'd never met him. He was rich, older than the hills, and lived alone in that big, gloomy manor at the edge of the village. People said he'd made his money in far-off places. Maybe not all of it, honestly. He kept to himself, rarely seen except by his staff, a butler, a cook, and a young maid. The village loved to gossip about him, spinning tales of hidden treasure or dark secrets. Now, it seemed, one of those secrets had caught up with him. Locked doors and bolted windows, Miss Marple mused, setting her cup down. That's a puzzle, isn't it? But puzzles have pieces, and pieces fit together if you look closely enough. Cherry leaned forward, eager. Are you going to figure it out, Miss Marple? You always do. Remember when Mrs. Baxter's silver went missing, and you knew it was her nephew all along? Or when the vicar's bicycle was stolen, and you found it in the church shed? Miss Marple chuckled softly. Those were small matters, Cherry. A missing spoon or a bicycle is one thing. Murder is quite another. But I'll keep my ears open. People talk, and talk reveals more than they mean to. Cherry nodded, then jumped up. I've got to get supper started, but I'll ask around. The village tomorrow. Someone's bound to know something. She hurried out, leaving Miss Marple alone with her knitting and her thoughts. The old lady leaned back in her chair, her needles moving again. She thought about Cornelius Hargrove, locked in his study, dead by a bullet no one could explain. She pictured the manor, a sprawling stone house with ivy creeping up the walls. She'd passed it on walks, noting its tall windows and heavy oak doors. A fortress, some called it, built to keep the world out. But someone had gotten in, or had they? Her mind flicked through possibilities like flipping pages in a book. A hidden passage? A trick with the lock? Or something simpler, something everyone had overlooked? Outside, the village was settling into evening. Children ran through the lanes, their laughter mixing with the clink of teacups from nearby houses. But the whispers about Hargrove's death didn't stop. They drifted through windows and over hedges, growing wilder with each telling. By supper time, some said Hargrove had been cursed, others that he'd shot himself, and the gun had vanished by magic. Miss Marple listened to it all, sorting truth from nonsense like she sorted wool for her knitting. The next morning, the village was still buzzing. Miss Marple tended her roses, her straw hat shading her face, when she heard footsteps on the path. She looked up to see Inspector Crane, his face red and his tie slightly crooked. He was a tall man, not yet 40, with a kind smile but a worried look in his eyes. He'd been stationed in St. Mary Mead for 2 years, and he'd learned to trust Miss Marple's sharp mind. "Good morning, Miss Marple," he said, tipping his hat. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all, Inspector," she replied, snipping a wilted rose. "You look troubled. Is it the Hargrove case?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You've heard, then. I don't mind saying it's got me in knots. I've never seen anything like it. A man shot dead in a locked room, no weapon, no way in or out. My men have searched every corner, and we're no closer to answers. Scotland Yard sent a detective yesterday, and even he's baffled." Miss Marple nodded, her expression gentle but her mind racing. "A locked room is a challenge, Inspector, but not impossible. May I ask what you found in the study?" Hesitated, then shrugged. "I suppose it can't hurt to tell you. The room's on the ground floor, with 1 door and 2 windows. The door was locked from the inside, key still in the lock. The windows were bolted, no signs of tampering. Hargrove was slumped at his desk, a bullet through his chest. No gun, no footprints, nothing disturbed except a half-written letter on the desk. It mentioned a debt, but it wasn't signed. A debt, Miss Marple repeated, her eyes narrowing. Interesting. And the staff? What do they say? Crane frowned. Not much. The butler, Grayson, found the body when he brought Hargrove's morning tea. He says he heard nothing all night. The cook, Mrs. Platt, was in the kitchen, and the maid Lily was cleaning upstairs. They all swear they saw no strangers, and the front gate was locked. Miss Marple set her pruning shears down. I see. And you're certain the room was sealed? As certain as I can be, Crane said. We checked the walls, the floor, even the chimney. Nothing. It's like the killer was a phantom. Miss Marple's lips twitched into a smile. Phantoms are rare, Inspector. People, on the other hand, are full of tricks. If I might make a suggestion, I'd like to see the manor myself. Sometimes a fresh pair of eyes notices what others miss. Crane's face brightened. Would you, Miss Marple? I'd be grateful. You've got a way of seeing things. Well, it's almost uncanny. Could you come this afternoon? I'll be there at 2, she said, and perhaps you could arrange for me to have a chat with the staff. A cup of tea often loosens tongues. Nodded eagerly. I'll make it happen. Thank you, Miss Marple. I don't know what we'd do without you. As he left, Miss Marple returned to her roses, but her mind was elsewhere. She thought of the locked study, the missing gun, the letter about a debt. She pictured the staff, Grayson, stiff and proper, Mrs. Platt, bustling in her kitchen, Lily, young and nervous. Someone knew something, she was sure of it. People always did, even if they didn't realize it. By noon, the village was in a frenzy. The postman told the baker that Hargrove had enemies from his days abroad. The baker told the vicar that the manor was haunted. The vicar told his wife that Hargrove's money was cursed. Miss Marple heard it all as she walked to the shop for a loaf of bread. She smiled at the wild stories, knowing most were nonsense, but every rumour held a grain of truth, and she tucked each one away like a pebble in her pocket. At 2 o'clock, Miss Marple arrived at Hargrove Manor. The house loomed over the village, its stone walls cold and grey. Ivy clung to the bricks, and the windows stared down like unblinking eyes. Inspector Crane met her at the gate, leading her through a creaky iron door into a dim hallway. The air smelled of polish and old wood, with a faint hint of something sharp. Cigar smoke, perhaps. They reached the study, a large room with heavy curtains and a thick oak door. The desk was wide, cluttered with papers and an ink bottle. A single chair lay tipped over, as if Hargrove had stood in a hurry. The windows were tall, their bolts rusted but intact. Miss Marple walked slowly, her eyes scanning every detail. She noted the pristine carpet, except for a faint scuff near the fireplace. The hearth was clean, but a trace of ash caught her eye, too fine to come from logs. Curious, she murmured, bending to look closer. The ash was pale, almost like paper. She straightened, her mind ticking like a clock. Crane watched her, hopeful. "See anything, Miss Marple?" "Perhaps," she said. "I'd like that. Tea with the staff now, if you please." As Crane led her to the kitchen, Miss Marple felt the weight of the house around her. It was a place of secrets, she thought, and secrets had a way of breaking free. She smiled to herself, her knitting bag tucked under her arm. The puzzle was taking shape, and she was ready to find the next piece. Chapter 2. An Invitation to Investigate. The afternoon sun dipped low, casting long shadows across St. Mary Mead. Miss Jane Marple stood at her cottage door, tying her scarf and adjusting her straw hat. Her knitting bag hung from her arm, a familiar weight that steadied her thoughts. She'd promised Inspector Crane she'd visit Hargrove Manor, and now, as the village clock struck 2, she set off down the lane. Her steps were slow but sure, her sharp blue eyes taking in every detail. The flutter of curtains in neighbours' windows, the quick glances from passers-by, the hum of gossip that followed her like a breeze. The village was still buzzing about Cornelius Hargrove's death. People lingered at the shop, swapping wild tales. Some said Hargrove had been cursed by an old rival. Others whispered of a secret lover who turned vengeful. Miss Marple listened as she passed, her face calm, but her mind sorting through the chatter. Most of it was nonsense, she knew, but even silly stories held clues if you knew where to look. Hargrove Manor loomed at the edge of the village, its grey stone walls half hidden by ivy. The iron gate creaked as Miss Marple pushed it open, her shoes crunching on the gravel path. Inspector Crane was waiting at the front door, his face a mix of relief and worry. His tie was still crooked, and his hair stuck up where he'd run his fingers through it. "Miss Marple, thank you for coming," he said, holding the door wide. "I don't mind saying we're in a muddle." She smiled, stepping into the dim hallway. "A muddle is just a puzzle waiting to be solved, Inspector. Shall we start with the study?" Crane nodded, leading her through the manor. The air was cool, heavy with the smell of wax and old wood. Portraits lined the walls, their painted eyes seeming to follow her. Miss Marple noted the silence. No clatter of dishes, no hum of voices. The house felt empty, like it was holding its breath. They reached a thick oak door, its brass knob gleaming. "This is it," Crane said, turning the key. "The study." The room was large, with tall windows draped in heavy curtains. A wide desk sat in the centre, cluttered with papers, an ink bottle, and a brass paperweight shaped like a lion. Sure. Single chair lay tipped over, as if Hargrove had jumped up in a panic. The carpet was thick, a deep green that swallowed sound. Miss Marple's eyes swept the space, lingering on the bolted windows, the locked door, the fireplace with its clean hearth. A faint whiff of cigar smoke hung in the air, sharp and out of place. She stepped forward, her fingers brushing the desk. A half-written letter caught her eye, its ink smudged but readable. It mentioned a debt, something about payment due and no more delays. The words stopped abruptly, unsigned. She tilted her head, picturing Hargrove at this desk. Pen in hand, heart racing. What had stopped him? Who was he writing to? "Curious?" she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Crane shifted behind her, eager. "Find something, Miss Marple." She turned, her expression mild. "Perhaps this letter. Did you read it?" Crane nodded. "Aye, but it doesn't tell us much. No name, no address. Could be anyone." "Or someone," she said, her eyes twinkling. She moved to the fireplace, crouching to peer inside. The hearth was swept clean, but a faint trace of ash dusted the bricks, too fine for wood. She brushed it with her finger, noting its powdery feel. "Something was burned here," she said. "Something small, maybe paper." Crane frowned, scratching his chin. "We checked the fireplace. Nothing but ash, and not much of it. Could have been a cigar, maybe?" Miss Marple stood dusting her hands. "Maybe, but cigars don't burn to powder like this." She glanced at the carpet, her gaze catching on a faint scuff mark near the hearth. It was slight, just a smudge of dirt, but it stood out against the pristine green. She filed it away in her mind, like a thread tucked into her knitting bag. She circled the room, checking the windows. The bolts were old, rusted in place, with no scratches or dents. The door's lock was solid, the key still inside, as Crane had said. She tapped the walls lightly, listening for hollow spots, but the stone was firm. "A proper fortress," she murmured. "Yet someone breached it." Crane sighed, his shoulders slumping. "That's the trouble, Miss Marple. We've turned this room upside down. No hidden doors, no secret panels. The chimney's too narrow for a man to climb. It's impossible, but here we are." Miss Marple's lips twitched into a smile. "Impossible is a word for people who've stopped looking, Inspector. Let's try another angle. I'd like that tea with the staff now, if you don't mind." Crane brightened, glad for a task. "Right away. They're in the kitchen. Grayson, Mrs. Platt, and young Lily. I'll fetch them." As he led her down a narrow hall, Miss Marple thought about the staff. Grayson, the butler, was a tall, stiff man with grey hair and a face that gave nothing away. She'd seen him in the village, always proper, carrying Hargrove's letters or fetching supplies. Mrs. Platt, the cook, was a round, cheerful woman who loved to gossip at the market. Lily, the maid, was barely 18, with wide eyes and a nervous giggle. 3 people, 3 pairs of eyes in this house. One of them, Miss Marple was sure, had seen something. The kitchen was warm, smelling of fresh bread and herbs. A long table sat in the centre, surrounded by mismatched chairs. Grayson stood by the stove, his hands clasped behind his back. Mrs. Platt was rolling dough, her apron dusted with flour. Lily sat in a corner, polishing silver spoons, her fingers trembling slightly. They all looked up as Miss Marple entered, their faces a mix of curiosity and unease. "Afternoon," Miss Marple said, her voice gentle. "I hope I'm not interrupting. Inspector Crane thought we might have a chat over tea." Mrs. Platt wiped, her hands forcing a smile. "No trouble at all, miss. I'll put the kettle on. Lily, fetch the cups." Lily jumped up, nearly dropping a spoon. "Yes, ma'am," she mumbled, scurrying to a cupboard. Miss Marple settled into a chair, her knitting bag on her lap. She pulled out her needles and a ball of soft blue wool, her hands moving in a steady rhythm. The clicking filled the quiet, putting the others at ease. People talked more when they felt comfortable, she knew, and nothing said harmless, like an old lady knitting. "So," she began, her tone light, "it's been a dreadful day, hasn't it? Poor Mr. Hargrove. I don't suppose any of you heard anything odd last night?" Grayson cleared his throat, his voice clipped. "Nothing, Miss Marple. I retired at 10, as always. The house was quiet." Mrs. Platt nodded, pouring hot water into a teapot. "Same here. I was in my room by 9, dead to the world. This old house creaks, but that's no surprise. Didn't hear a peep out of the ordinary." Lily set the cups down, her hands shaky. I was upstairs, cleaning the guest rooms. I didn't hear nothing either." Miss Marple's eyes flicked to Lily, noting the girl's flushed cheeks. "Cleaning so late, dear? That's a lot of work for one evening." Lily bit her lip, looking at the floor. Mr. Hargrove liked things just so. I was behind is all. Miss Marple nodded, her smile kind but her mind sharp. Lily was nervous, more than the others. Was it just the shock of the murder, or something else? She turned to Grayson. "You found Mr. Hargrove this morning, I hear. That must have been a terrible shock." Grayson's face tightened just for a moment. "It was, miss. I brought his tea at 7, as usual. Knocked, got no answer. I used my key, and there he was at his desk, dead." Mrs. Platt shuddered, passing out teacups. "Horrible, just horrible. Who'd do such a thing, and how? The door was locked, wasn't it?" Crane, standing by the door, nodded. "Locked tight. Windows, too. That's what's got us stumped." Miss Marple sipped her tea, her needles never stopping. "A puzzle, indeed. Mrs. Platt, you've been here years, haven't you? Did Mr. Hargrove ever have visitors? Someone who might have held a grudge?" Mrs. Platt hesitated, glancing at Grayson. "Well, not often. He kept to himself mostly, but there were a few now and then. Cloaked sorts, coming late at night. Never saw their faces. Mr. Hargrove didn't like us asking questions." Grayson frowned, his voice sharp. "Mrs. Platt, that's hardly relevant. Mr. Hargrove valued his privacy. Those visitors were business, nothing more." Miss Marple tilted her head, her eyes on Grayson. "Business can turn sour, Mr. Grayson. That letter on his desk mentioned a debt. Any idea who he owed?" Grayson's hands twitched, then stilled. "No, miss. Mr. Hargrove didn't share such things with me." She nodded, letting the silence stretch. Lily was staring at her cup, her knuckles white. Mrs. Platt busied herself with the teapot, avoiding Miss Marple's gaze. Grayson stood like a statue, but his eyes darted to the door. They were hiding something, Miss Marple thought. Not all of them, perhaps, but at least one. Secrets were like weeds. They grew in the dark but wilted under light. Chapter 3. The Household Secrets. The morning mist clung to St. Mary Mead, wrapping the village in a soft grey blanket. Miss Jane Marple stood at her cottage window, sipping tea and watching the world wake up. Her knitting lay folded on the table, but her mind was far from scarves and stitches. She was thinking about Hargrove Manor, the locked study, the faint ash in the fireplace, the scuff mark on the carpet. Most of all, she was thinking about the staff. Grayson's stiff manners, Mrs. Platt's quick glances, Lily's trembling hands. They knew something, she was certain, even if they didn't know they knew it. Cherry bustled in, her apron slightly crooked. "Morning, Miss Marple. The village is still talking about Mr. Hargrove. Mrs. Price says you're up at the manor, sniffing out clues. Is it true? Are you going to solve it?" Miss Marple smiled, setting her cup down. "I'm only looking, Cherry. But looking can lead to finding, if you do it right. I'm heading back to the manor today. Would you ask around the village, see what folks say about Grayson, Mrs. Platt, or young Lily?" Cherry's eyes sparkled. "Oh, I will. I'll pop by the shop and the post office. Someone's bound to have a story." She hurried out, eager as a puppy. Miss Marple tied her scarf, tucked her knitting bag under her arm, and set off. The manor wasn't far, but the walk gave her time to think. Cornelius Hargrove's death was a puzzle, and puzzles had edges. Start with those, and the middle filled itself in. The edges here were the staff, the study, and that half-written letter about a debt. She pictured the letters smudged ink, the words payment due scrawled in a shaky hand. Who did Hargrove owe? And why had he died before he could finish writing? The manor's gate creaked as she pushed it open. Inspector Crane was waiting, his coat damp from the mist. "Morning, Miss Marple," he said, tipping his hat. "The staff's in the kitchen again. I've told them to expect you. Anything special you want to ask?" She nodded, her eyes bright. "Just let them talk, Inspector. People say more when they're comfortable, but I'd like a quick look at the study first, if you don't mind." Crane led her inside. The manor's heavy, silence pressing down. The study was as she'd left it, desk cluttered, chair tipped, windows bolted. The air still held a faint trace of cigar smoke, sharp and bitter. Miss Marple circled the room, her steps slow. She paused by the fireplace, crouching to study the hearth. The ash was still there, fine and powdery, not like wood or coal. She brushed it with her finger, her mind ticking. Something had been burned here, something small and deliberate. Her gaze drifted to the scuff mark on the carpet, just a smudge of dirt near the hearth. It was odd, out of place in the pristine room. She pictured Lily, nervous and jumpy, polishing, silver in the kitchen. Had the girl been here cleaning too quickly, missing a spot, or was it someone else, moving in a hurry? She stood, dusting her hands. "Thank you, Inspector. Let's see the staff now." The kitchen was warm, a welcome change from the chilly study. Mrs. Platt was at the stove, stirring a pot that smelled of onions and thyme. Grayson stood by the door, his face blank as a stone wall. Lily sat at the table peeling potatoes, her knife slipping now and then. They all looked up as Miss Marple entered, their eyes wary but polite. "Good morning," she said, settling into a chair. "I hope I'm not in the way. Mrs. Platt, that smells lovely. Could I trouble you for another cup of tea?" Mrs. Platt beamed, glad for the compliment. "No trouble at all, miss. Lily, get the teapot." Lily scurried to obey, her cheeks pink. Miss Marple pulled out her knitting, the needles clicking softly. The sound filled the quiet, easing the tension. She'd learned long ago that people opened up when they felt safe, and nothing was safer than an old lady with her wool. "So," she began, her tone light, "it's a sad time, isn't it? Mr. Hargrove gone, and no answers yet. I wonder if any of you noticed anything odd in the days before. A stranger at the gate, maybe, or a letter that upset him." Grayson spoke first, his voice crisp. "Nothing out of the ordinary, Miss Marple. Mr. Hargrove kept to his routine. Letters came and went, but that was normal. He was a private man." Mrs. Platt nodded, pouring tea. "Aye, private as a locked box. But, well, he was touchy lately. Snapped at me once over the soup, which wasn't like him. I thought he was. Worried, maybe about money." Miss Marple's needles paused. "Money? Did he mention anything specific?" Mrs. Platt hesitated, glancing at Grayson. "Not exactly. Just a feeling," he'd mutter sometimes, pacing in his study. "I heard him say, 'They'll get theirs once,' but I didn't ask. Not my place." Lily set the teacups down, her hands trembling. "He was cross with me too," she mumbled. "Said I was too slow cleaning. But I wasn't, I swear." Miss Marple smiled, her eyes gentle. "I'm sure you did your best, dear. Cleaning a big house like this is hard work. Did you ever clean the study? That carpet's so clean, except for that little scuff by the fireplace." Lily's face went red, her knife freezing mid-peel. I didn't scuff it. I swept the study every day like Mr. Hargrove wanted. Maybe it was there before. Grayson's eyes flicked to Lily, sharp and quick. The girl's clumsy sometimes, he said. She might have missed a spot. Lily's lip trembled, but she said nothing. Miss Marple nodded, her expression kind but her mind racing. Lily was hiding something, and Grayson was too quick to cover for her. Why? She sipped her tea, letting the silence stretch. People filled silences, she knew, and often said more than they meant to. Mrs. Platt broke the quiet, her voice low. There was one thing, miss. Those late-night visitors. I told you about them yesterday. Cloaked men coming after dark. They'd go straight to the study, and I'd hear voices, low and angry. Never saw their faces, but they gave me the shivers. Miss Marple tilted her head. How often did they come? Once a month, maybe, Mrs. Platt said. Been happening for years. Mr. Hargrove always locked the study door when they were here. I'd bring tea to the hall and leave it. Never went in. Grayson cleared his throat, his tone sharp. Mrs. Platt, that's enough. Those were business matters, nothing to do with this. Miss Marple's eyes flicked to Grayson. Business can turn dangerous, Mr. Grayson. That letter on the desk mentioned a debt. If Mr. Hargrove owed someone money, they might have been angry enough to act. Grayson's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Lily stared at her potatoes, her knife still. Mrs. Platt busied herself at the stove, her cheeks flushed. The air felt thick, like a storm was brewing in the kitchen. Miss Marple knitted on, her needle steady. She was poking at secrets, and secrets didn't like being poked. She turned to Lily, her voice soft. Dear, you must have seen a lot working. Here, did Mr. Hargrove ever talk about his family? I hear he had a nephew. Lily nodded, her voice small. Mr. Rowland, yes. He came sometimes, but not often. He and Mr. Hargrove would argue, loud like. I heard them once, about money. Mr. Rowland wanted some, but Mr. Hargrove said no. Mrs. Platt snorted. That Rowland's a bad sort. Always in debt, gambling it away. Everyone in the village knows it. Grayson shot her a look. Gossip, Mrs. Platt. Mr. Rowland is family, and we don't speak ill of family. Miss Marple smiled, faintly. Family can be complicated. I'd like to meet this Mr. Rowland. Inspector, could you arrange it? Crane, who'd been quiet by the door, nodded. I'll send for him. He's in London, but he's coming tomorrow to settle the estate. Miss Marple set her knitting down, folding her hands. Thank you all for your time. It's been very helpful. She stood, her knitting bag tucked under her arm. Inspector, a word outside? They stepped into the hall, the kitchen door clicking shut. Crane looked eager. What do you make of it, Miss Marple? They're jumpy, aren't they? She nodded, her eyes gleaming. Very. Lily's scared, Grayson's hiding something, and Mrs. Platt knows more than she's saying. That scuff mark still bothers me, and those late-night visitors are interesting. I want to see the study again tomorrow, and I'd like to meet Rowland. He's a piece of this puzzle, I'm sure. Crane rubbed his chin. You think the staff's involved? Not all of them, she said. But someone in this house knows something. Secrets are like shadows, Inspector. They follow you until the light hits them. As they walked to the gate, Miss Marple glanced back at the manor. Its windows stared, down, cold and unyielding. She thought of the ash, the scuff, the letter, the cloaked visitors. The puzzle was growing, and every piece mattered. She felt a spark of excitement, the kind that came when a mystery started to crack open. Back in the village, the mist was lifting, but the whispers hadn't stopped. By evening, word had spread that Miss Marple was digging into the Hargrove case. At the shop, Mrs. Price told the baker that Miss Marple had been at the manor, asking questions. The baker told the postman that she'd spoken to the staff. The postman told the vicar that she was meeting Roland Hargrove. Miss Marple heard it all as she bought a pint of milk, her smile quiet, but her mind sharp. She walked home, the manor's shadow lingering in her thoughts. Roland was coming, and with him maybe answers. The staff were nervous, the study held secrets, and somewhere a killer thought they'd gotten away. But Miss Marple was watching, and she never missed a thing. Chapter 4. The Locked Room Riddle. The morning sun broke through the clouds, bathing St. Mary Mead in a warm glow. Miss Jane Marple sat at her breakfast table, nibbling toast and sipping tea. Her knitting lay beside her, but her mind was on Hargrove Manor. The locked study, the missing gun, the scuff mark by the fireplace. They were pieces of a puzzle, and she was determined to fit them together. Today she'd return to the manor to meet Roland Hargrove, the nephew with a taste for gambling. But first she wanted another look at that study. Something about it nagged at her, like a loose thread in her knitting. Cherry burst in, her curls bouncing. "Miss Marple, I asked around like you said. Folks have plenty to say about the manor staff. Mrs. Platt's a gossip, but everyone likes her pies. Grayson's so proper, people call him a statue. And Lily, well, the grocer says she's sweet but jumpy, always looking over her shoulder." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes twinkling. "Good work, Cherry. Jumpy, is she? That's worth knowing. Keep listening, dear. Every whisper helps." Cherry beamed, then dashed off to start chores. Miss Marple finished her tea, tied her scarf, and grabbed her knitting bag. The walk to the manor was brisk, the village alive with chatter. People leaned over fences, swapping tales about Cornelius Hargrove's death. Some said he'd been killed by a vengeful spirit. Others swore it was a thief after his gold. Miss Marple smiled to herself, sorting truth from nonsense. Spirits didn't shoot bullets, and gold didn't vanish from a locked room. At the manor, Inspector Crane met her at the gate, his face tired but hopeful. "Morning, Miss Marple. Roland's coming this afternoon, but I've got the study ready for you now. Anything special you're looking for?" She adjusted her hat, her voice calm. "Just a closer look, Inspector. Sometimes the smallest things speak the loudest." Crane led her through the manor's dim halls, the air heavy with polish and secrets. The study door creaked open, revealing the same scene. Cluttered desk, tipped chair, bolted windows. The faint smell of cigar smoke lingered, sharp against the musty scent of old books. Miss Marple stepped inside, her eyes scanning every inch. She pictured Cornelius Hargrove here, writing his letter about a debt, his heart stopping with a single shot. How had it happened? Who had outsmarted a locked room? She started with the desk, sifting through papers, bills, receipts, a faded map of some foreign city. Nothing unusual, but she noted the letter again. Its ink was smudged, the words payment due jagged, as if written in a hurry. She traced the letters with her finger, imagining Hargrove's fear. Was he begging for time? Threatening someone? She tucked the thought away, moving to the windows. The bolts were rusted, untouched with cobwebs in the corners. She pressed the glass, checking for loose panes, but everything was solid. The door was next, thick oak, the lock heavy and old. The key, still inside, turned smoothly when she tested it. No scratches, no signs of tampering. She tapped the walls, listening for hollow spots, but the stone was firm. "A fortress," she murmured, echoing her thought from yesterday. Her gaze fell on the fireplace, its hearth clean except for that faint trace of ash. She crouched, her knees creaking, and studied it closely. The ash was powdery, not like wood or coal. She rubbed it between her fingers, her mind racing. Something was burned here, she said half to herself. Something small, maybe paper, or something else. Crane, watching from the door, frowned. "We checked the fireplace, Miss Marple. Nothing but that ash. Could it be a cigar like I said?" She shook her head, standing. "Cigars leave flakes, Inspector. This is too fine, too deliberate. Someone wanted no trace left." She glanced at the scuff mark on the carpet, just a smudge near the hearth. It bothered her, that lone mark in an otherwise spotless room. She pictured Lily's flushed face, her quick denial about cleaning. Was it her mistake, or someone else's? Miss Marple pulled a small notebook from her knitting bag, sketching the room's layout. Desk in the centre, windows to the left, fireplace to the right, door straight ahead. She marked the scuff, the ash, the letter's position. "Every detail matters," she said, her pencil scratching. "A locked room isn't magic, it's a trick, and tricks have tools." Crane shifted, his boots squeaking. "Tools? Like what? We've searched every inch. No gun, no rope, no nothing." She smiled, tucking the notebook away. "Then we search where no one thinks to look. Let's talk to Roland now, but I'll want to come back here after. This room has more to say." They left the study, locking it behind them. The manor felt colder as they walked to the drawing-room, where Roland Hargrove was waiting. The room was grand, with velvet chairs and a poor chandelier that sparkled faintly. Roland stood by a window, his back to them. He was young, maybe 30, with slick dark hair and a tailored suit that looked expensive but worn. His hands were in his pockets, but Miss Marple noticed a slight tremble as he turned. "Mr. Hargrove," Crane said, "this is Miss Marple. She's helping with the case." Roland's smile was charming, but his eyes were wary. "A pleasure, ma'am, though I'm not sure what an old lady can do with this mess." His voice was smooth, with a hint of a city accent. Miss Marple settled into a chair, her knitting bag on her lap. "Old ladies notice things, Mr. Hargrove, like how you're here so quickly when you live in London." Roland laughed, but it sounded forced. "Family business, you know. Had to come settle Uncle Cornelius's affairs. Dreadful thing, his death." She pulled out her needles, the clicking filling the quiet. "Dreadful, yes, and puzzling. A locked room, a missing gun. Where were you the night he died?" Roland's smile faltered, just for a moment. "London, at a club. The Red Lion, near Covent Garden. I was there till midnight, playing cards. Ask the barmaid, Sally. She'll vouch for me." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes on her knitting. "I'm sure she will. You and your uncle were close, I hear. though Lily mentioned you, argued sometimes about money." Roland's jaw tightened, but he kept his tone light. "Lily talks too much. Yes, we argued. Uncle was tight with his cash, and I'm not exactly flush. But I'd never hurt him. He was family." She tilted her head, her gaze sharp. "Family can be complicated. That letter on his desk mentioned a debt. Any idea who he owed?" Roland shrugged, his hands spreading. "No clue. Uncle had his secrets. Probably some old business deal gone sour. He was rich, you know. People always want a piece of that." Miss Marple knitted on, her needles steady. Roland was smooth, but his answers were too quick, too polished. She thought of the village gossip, his gambling, his debts. A man like that might get desperate, might see an inheritance as a way out. But how could he have entered a locked room? She filed the thought away, turning to Crane. "Inspector, could we check the study once more before I go? I'd like to see that fireplace again." Crane nodded, eager to keep her happy. "Of course, Mr. Hargrove, you'll stay here." Roland waved a hand, sinking into a chair. "Take your time. I've got nowhere to be." Back in the study, Miss Marple went straight to the fireplace. She knelt, ignoring the ache in her knees, and peered up the chimney. It was narrow, too tight for a person, but she noticed a faint smudge on the bricks, like soot disturbed. She reached up, her fingers brushing something hard, a small ledge hidden just out of sight. Nothing was there, but the ledge itself was odd, out of place in a clean chimney. "Curious," she murmured, standing. She turned to the scuff mark, crouching, to study it. The dirt was dry, a mix of grit and ash, as if someone had stepped in the hearth and tracked it out. She pictured the room at night, dark and silent, Hargrove at his desk. A shot, a body falling, and then— what? The killer vanishing, leaving no trace but ash and a scuff. Crane watched, hopeful. "Anything, Miss Marple?" She straightened, dusting her hands. "A few things, Inspector. This fireplace is more than it seems. And that scuff, it's not just dirt. I'd like Lily to sweep the hearth tomorrow, with me watching. Can you arrange it?" Crane nodded, scribbling in his notebook. "I'll make it happen. You think the fireplace is key?" "I think it's a piece," she said, her eyes gleaming. "And pieces lead to pictures. I'll see you tomorrow, after I've had a word with Lily." As they left the manor, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky pink. Miss Marple walked home, her mind turning over the day's clues. Roland's shaky alibi, the hidden ledge, the scuff mark, the ash. They were threads, and she was weaving them together. The village was quiet now, the gossip settling into whispers. But Miss Marple knew the truth was close, hiding in the shadows of that locked room. She just had to shine a light on it. Chapter 5. A Clue in the Ashes. The morning was crisp in St. Mary Mead, with a breeze that rustled the leaves and carried the scent of fresh bread from the village bakery. Miss Jane Marple sat by her cottage window, her tea cooling as she stared at her notebook. She'd sketched the layout of Hargrove's study, desk, windows, fireplace, and that stubborn scuff mark near the hearth. Her pencil had circled the fireplace, where the powdery ash and hidden ledge kept tugging at her thoughts. Today, she'd asked Inspector Crane to have Lily sweep the hearth while she watched. Something told her the fireplace held a secret, and Lily's nervous glances might betray it. Cherry poked her head in, her apron dusted with flour. "Miss Marple, I heard more at the shop. The postman says Roland Hargrove has been seen with shady types in London. Gamblers, maybe worse. And Mrs. Platt told the butcher she's scared to stay at the manor. Says it feels cursed." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled as she closed her notebook. "Cursed, Cherry? That's just fear talking. But Roland's friends are interesting. Keep your ears open, dear. Anything about Lily or Grayson?" Cherry nodded, eager. "The grocer says Lily's been buying extra candles, like she's up late. Grayson's quiet as ever. No one knows much about him." She dashed off to finish baking, leaving Miss Marple to her thoughts. Miss Marple tied her scarf, tucked her knitting bag under her arm, and set off for Hargrove Manor. The village was alive with gossip, the air thick with tales of ghosts and hidden gold. She passed the shop, where Mrs. Price was telling a customer that Miss Marple was snooping at the manor. Miss Marple smiled to herself, letting the whispers slide past. Gossip was like wind. It carried seeds of truth if you knew how to catch them. At the manor, Inspector Crane waited by the gate, his coat buttoned against the chill. "Morning, Miss Marple," he said, his face a mix of hope and exhaustion. "Lily's ready in the study like you asked. I've got her sweeping the fireplace now. Anything else you need?" Miss Marple adjusted her hat, her voice calm. "Just keep an eye on her, Inspector. People show their secrets when they're nervous. I'd also like a word with Roland again, if he's still here." Crane nodded. "He's in the drawing room, sulking. I'll fetch him after you're done with Lily." They walked through the manor's dim halls, the silence broken only by the creak of floorboards. The study door was open, and Lily stood by the fireplace, a broom in her hands. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes darting as she swept the hearth. The room was unchanged. Cluttered desk, tipped chair, bolted windows. The faint cigar smoke still hung in the air, sharp and out of place. Miss Marple stepped inside, her knitting bag a comforting weight. "Good morning, Lily," she said, settling into a chair near the desk. "Don't mind me, dear. Just keep sweeping. That fireplace looks like it needs a good clean." Lily nodded, her voice small. "Yes, miss." She brushed the hearth, her movements jerky. Dust and ash swirled, catching the light. Miss Marple watched closely, her eyes sharp behind her gentle smile. She noted Lily's grip on the broom, too tight, as if she was afraid of what she might find. Miss Marple pulled out her knitting, the needles clicking softly. The sound filled the quiet, easing the tension. "You must be tired, Lily, working so hard in this big house. Did you sweep this fireplace the day Mr. Hargrove died?" Lily's broom paused just for a moment. I think so, miss. I sweep it every day. Mr. Hargrove liked things tidy." Miss Marple nodded, her needles steady. "Of course, but that scuff mark by the hearth, did you notice it before? It's odd, in such a clean room." Lily's face went red, her eyes fixed on the hearth. "I didn't make it, miss. I swear. Maybe it was there already." Miss Marple smiled, her voice soft. "No one's blaming you, dear, but scuffs don't appear by magic. Someone stepped there, maybe in a hurry. Did you ever see anyone near the fireplace? Mr. Hargrove, perhaps, or a visitor?" Lily shook her head, sweeping faster. "No, miss, just me, cleaning. Mr. Hargrove stayed at his desk mostly. Visitors went straight to him, never near the hearth. Miss Marple's eyes flicked to the hearth, where Lily's broom had stirred up more ash. Something glinted in the pile, a tiny scrap of paper, singed at the edges. Miss Marple leaned forward, her heart quickening. "Lily, dear, hold a moment. What's that?" Lily froze, her eyes wide. Miss Marple stood, moving to the hearth with surprising speed for an old lady. She knelt, ignoring the ache in her knees, and picked up the scrap. It was small, no bigger than a postage stamp, but 2 words were clear in smudged ink. "Pay now." The rest was burned away, but the words were enough. She tucked the scrap into her handbag, her mind racing. "Curious," she murmured, standing. "This wasn't here before, was it, Lily?" Lily's lip trembled, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know, miss. I didn't see it." Miss Marple patted her arm, her smile kind but her eyes sharp. "That's all right, dear. You've been very helpful. Why don't you finish up? I'll have a word with the inspector." Lily nodded, her hands shaking as she resumed sweeping. Miss Marple stepped into the hall, where Crane was waiting. I showed him the scrap, her voice low. "This was in the ash, Inspector. Pay now. It matches the letter on the desk. Someone burned this, and they didn't want it found." Crane's eyes widened, his notebook flipping open. "Blimey, Miss Marple, that's a clue, isn't it? But how'd it get missed?" She tilted her head, her gaze steady. "It was hidden, or someone swept it under. Lily's nervous more than she should be. I'd keep an eye on her. Now let's see Roland." Crane led her to the drawing room, where Roland Hargrove lounged in a velvet chair, a cigarette in his hand. His suit was sharp but creased, his eyes bloodshot. He looked up as they entered, his smile thin. "Back again, Miss Marple. You're persistent, I'll give you that." Miss Marple settled across from him, her knitting bag on her lap. "Persistence solves puzzles, Mr. Hargrove. I've been thinking about your uncle's letter, the one about a debt. You said you knew nothing about it, but I hear you've had money troubles yourself. Gambling, wasn't it?" Roland's smile faded, his fingers tightening on the cigarette. "Village gossip, is it? Yes, I like a flutter. Cards, horses, you name it. But I didn't owe Uncle Cornelius a penny. If anything, he owed me keeping, me waiting for my inheritance." Miss Marple's needles clicked, her voice calm. "Inheritance can make people impatient. Your alibi, the Red Lion Club, Sally the barmaid, was it? Is she a reliable sort?" Roland shrugged, blowing smoke. "Reliable enough. Ask her yourself. I was there till midnight, nowhere near this dreary place." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes on her knitting. "I may do that. One more thing. Did your uncle ever mention someone called the broker? A business contact, perhaps?" Roland's hand froze, the cigarette halfway to his lips. "The broker? Never heard of him. Sounds like one of Uncle's shady deals. He had plenty, you know." Miss Marple smiled faintly, tucking her knitting away. "Thank you, Mr. Hargrove. You've been most helpful." As they left the drawing room, Crane whispered, "What was that about the broker? You think he's real?" Miss Marple's eyes gleamed. "Oh, he's real, Inspector. Roland's face told me that. He knows the name and he's scared of it. We need to dig deeper into Roland's debts, Lily's nerves, and that fireplace. I'd like to come back tomorrow. Can you have Grayson here? I've a few questions for him." Crane nodded, scribbling furiously. "Anything you say, Miss Marple. You're on to something, aren't you?" She adjusted her scarf, her voice soft. "I'm following threads, Inspector, and threads lead to knots." They parted at the gate, the manor's shadow stretching across the lawn. Miss Marple walked home, the scrap of paper burning a hole in her mind. "Pay now!" A demand, a threat, burned to hide its sender. She thought of Lily's trembling hands, Roland's quick lies, the hidden ledge in the chimney. The puzzle was sharpening, its edges clearer. Someone had killed Cornelius Hargrove, thinking a locked room would protect them. But Miss Marple was closing in, one clue at a time. Back in the village, the gossip was wilder than ever. The baker told the vicar that Miss Marple had found something in the manor. The vicar told his wife that she was questioning Roland. The wife told the postman that Lily was acting strange. Miss Marple heard it all as she bought a loaf of bread, her smile quiet, but her mind racing. The truth was out there, buried in ash and secrets, and she was determined to find it. Chapter 6. The Nighttime Visitor. The evening settled over St. Mary Mead like a soft blanket, the village lights twinkling under a starry sky. Miss Jane Marple sat by her cottage window, her knitting needles idle for once. Her notebook lay open, filled with sketches of Hargrove's study and notes on the clues. The singed scrap reading "Pay Now," the scuff mark by the fireplace, the hidden ledge in the chimney. The puzzle was taking shape, but pieces were still missing. Lily's nerves, Roland's lies, and Grayson's guarded silence all pointed to secrets, and Miss Marple was determined to uncover them. She thought about the manor staff, picturing their faces in the warm kitchen, Lily's trembling hands, Grayson's sharp glances, Mrs. Platt's hesitant gossip. Each held a thread of the truth. The burned note was a clue, but it raised more questions. Who had written it? Why burn it? And how did it tie to the locked room? Miss Marple's eyes narrowed, her mind sharp as a needle. She needed to see more, to catch someone off guard. Tonight, she decided she'd watch the manor after dark. Cherry poked her head in, carrying a tray of biscuits. "Miss Marple, you're up late. Still thinking about that murder? The village is buzzing. Mrs. Price says you found a secret note in the fireplace." Miss Marple smiled, taking a biscuit. "Mrs. Price has sharp ears, doesn't she? Yes, I found a note, Cherry, but it's just a piece of the puzzle. Have you heard anything new about Lily or Grayson?" Cherry sat, munching a biscuit. "The milkman says Lily's been buying more candles, like she's scared of the dark. And the butcher saw Grayson posting a letter yesterday, looking all sneaky. No one knows who it was for." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes gleaming. "Sneaky, is he? That's worth knowing. Keep listening, dear, and if you hear about anyone visiting the manor at night, let me know." Cherry's eyes widened. "You think someone's sneaking around? Oh, I'll ask everyone tomorrow." She hurried off to bed, leaving Miss Marple alone with her plans. Miss Marple wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, tucked her notebook into her knitting bag, and slipped out the back door. The village was quiet, most houses dark. She moved silently, her steps soft on the grass, avoiding the main lanes. The manor wasn't far, and she knew a path through the woods that would keep her hidden. She wasn't young, but she was spry. and years of solving mysteries had taught her how to blend into the shadows. The manor loomed ahead, its stone walls black against the night sky. The windows were dark, except for a faint glow in the kitchen. Miss Marple crouched behind a hedge, her eyes fixed on the garden gate. She'd chosen this spot carefully. It gave her a clear view of the manor's side entrance, where Mrs. Platt had said cloaked visitors used to come. If someone was moving tonight, she'd see them. The air was cool, the only sounds the rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. Miss Marple waited, patient as a cat. Her mind wandered to the burned. Note, pay now. It was a demand, sharp and urgent, meant to scare. She thought of Roland, his gambling debts piling up, and Grayson posting secret letters. Could one of them have written it? Or was it someone else? Someone like the broker Roland had flinched at. The pieces didn't fit yet, but they were close. At midnight a shadow moved near the gate. Miss Marple's heart quickened, her eyes narrowing. It was a small figure, cloaked in a dark shawl, slipping through the garden. The figure paused, glancing around, then crept to the side door. Miss Marple leaned forward, recognizing the nervous gait. It was Lily, the maid. She was carrying something small, a folded paper, and she slid it under the door before hurrying back to the gate. Miss Marple stayed still, her mind racing. Lily, sneaking out at night to deliver a note. To whom? She waited, counting minutes, until another shadow appeared. This one was taller, moving with purpose. The figure stopped at the door, picked up the note, and slipped inside. Miss Marple caught a glimpse of a stiff posture and grey hair. Grayson, the butler. She held her breath, straining to hear. From inside, a faint murmur of voices drifted out, too low to catch. "No one must know," Grayson's voice hissed, sharp and clear for a moment. The door clicked shut, and the voices stopped. Miss Marple waited, but no one else came. The manor fell silent again, its secrets locked tight. She stood, her knees stiff, and made her way home, careful to stay in the shadows. The village was asleep, unaware of the drama unfolding at its edge. Miss Marple slipped into her cottage, lighting a single candle. She opened her notebook, jotting down what she'd seen. Lily's note, Grayson's words, the late-night meeting. It was a clue, a big one, but it raised new questions. What was Lily passing to Grayson? Why the secrecy? And how did it tie to Hargrove's death? The next morning, Miss Marple was up early, her tea steaming as she planned her day. She'd go back to the manor, confront Lily gently, and press Grayson harder. The burned note and the nighttime meeting were linked, she was sure, and the fireplace was still the key. She thought of the scuff mark, the ash, the hidden ledge. Someone had used that hearth, not to escape, but to hide something. Maybe the gun, maybe the truth. Cherry burst in, her face pink with excitement. "Miss Marple, I heard something. The postman says Grayson's been getting letters with no return address, all in black ink. And the baker saw Lily crying by the well yesterday, like she's scared out of her wits." Miss Marple nodded, her keen eyes sharp. "Scared, is she? Thank you, Cherry. That fits. I'm off to the manor now. If Inspector Crane comes by, tell him I'll need him there by noon." She tied her scarf, grabbed her knitting bag, and set off. The village was buzzing, the gossip louder than ever. People whispered that Miss Marple was closing in on the killer, that she'd found a secret in the manor. She passed the shop, where Mrs. Price was telling a customer about the burned note. Miss Marple smiled, letting the chatter fade. The truth was close, and she was ready to pull it into the light. At the manor, Inspector Crane met her at the gate, his notebook ready. "Morning, Miss Marple. Lily's in the kitchen, and Grayson's about. Roland's still here too, in the drawing-room. What's the plan?" Miss Marple adjusted her hat, her voice calm. "I'd like to start with Lily, Inspector. Alone, if you please. Then I'll need Grayson. Something happened last night, and I want answers." Crane's eyes widened, but he nodded. "Right away. I'll keep Grayson busy till you're ready." The kitchen was warm, smelling of fresh scones. Lily was at the table, polishing silver, her hands shaking. She looked up as Miss Marple entered, her eyes wide with fear. Miss Marple settled into a chair, pulling out her knitting. The needles clicked, a soothing rhythm that filled the quiet. "Good morning, Lily," she said, her voice gentle. "You look tired, dear. Up late, were you?" Lily's spoon clattered to the table, her face pale. I slept fine, miss. Just tired from work." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes on her knitting. "Work can be heavy, especially in a house like this. I was out for a walk last night, near the manor. Funny thing, I saw someone slipping a note under the side door. Looked like you, Lily." Lily's breath caught, her hands twisting in her apron. "It wasn't me, miss. I swear, I was in bed." Miss Marple's smile was kind, but her gaze was sharp. "Now, dear, lies don't help. I saw you, and I saw Grayson pick up that note. What was it? A message for him, or from someone else?" Lily's eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking. "Oh, miss, I didn't mean no harm. Grayson asked me to pass notes sometimes, just to the door. Said it was for Mr. Hargrove's business, but I didn't read them. I'm sorry, I didn't. No, it was wrong." Miss Marple patted her hand, her voice soft. There, you're not in trouble, Lily, but I need the truth. Who were the notes from? And where did you get them?" Lily sniffled, wiping her eyes. "They came in the post, no name, just black ink. Grayson gave me a shilling to deliver them at night, so no one would see. I thought it was just business, but after Mr. Hargrove died, I got scared." Miss Marple nodded, her mind racing. "Black ink, no name, like the burned note." "Thank you, Lily. You've done the right thing. Stay here and don't tell Grayson we spoke." She stood, tucking her knitting away, and found Crane in the hall. "Inspector, bring Grayson to the study. It's time we had a proper talk." Grayson was waiting in the study, his face a mask of calm, but Miss Marple noticed his hands, clasped tightly behind his back, and the slight twitch in his jaw. She settled by the desk, her knitting bag on her lap, and gestured for Crane to close the door. "Mr. Grayson," she began, her voice mild, "you've been very helpful, but I think you know more than you've said. Last night I saw Lily pass you a note. Care to explain?" Grayson's eyes flickered, but his voice was steady. "I don't know what you mean, Miss Marple. I was in my room all night." Miss Marple's needles clicked, her gaze unwavering. "I heard you, Mr. Grayson. No one must know, you said. What mustn't we know? Was it about the note that said pay now, the one burned in this fireplace?" Grayson's face paled, his hands dropping to his sides. "You're mistaken, miss. I've no idea about any note." Miss Marple leaned forward, her voice soft but firm. "Lying won't help, Mr. Grayson. Lily told me about the notes you had her deliver. The ones in black ink. They're tied to Mr. Hargrove's death, aren't they? Who were they from? The broker, perhaps?" Grayson's jaw clenched, his eyes darting to the door. For a moment Miss Marple thought he'd bolt, but he sagged, his voice low. I can't say, miss. It's not safe. You don't understand what you're stirring up." Crane stepped forward, his voice sharp. "You'd better start talking, Grayson, or you'll be answering in a cell." Miss Marple raised a hand, her smile gentle. "No need for that, Inspector. Mr. Grayson will tell us when he's ready. But I'll be back tomorrow, and I expect answers. Think carefully, Mr. Grayson. Secrets don't stay buried." She stood, tucking her knitting bag under her arm, and left the study with Crane. Outside, the manor's shadow felt heavier, its secrets thicker. Miss Marple's mind buzzed with the night's clues. Lily's confession, Grayson's fear, the notes in black ink. The fireplace was still the key, she was sure, and Grayson was closer to the truth than he wanted to admit. As she walked home, the village was alive with whispers. The postman told the baker that Miss Marple had caught Lily sneaking around. The baker told the vicar that Grayson was hiding something. The vicar told his wife that the manor was full of secrets. Miss Marple heard it all as she passed the shop, her smile quiet, but her heart racing. The puzzle was cracking open, and she was ready for the next piece. Chapter 7. The trap is set. The morning sun spilled over St. Mary Mead, chasing away the chill and painting the cottages in soft gold. Miss Jane Marple sat at her breakfast table, her tea steaming as she pored over her notebook. The pages were filled with sketches of Hargrove's study, desk, fireplace, scuff mark, and notes on the clues, the burned pay now scrap, Lily's nighttime note passing, Grayson's whispered, "No one must know." Each piece pointed to a truth hidden in the manor, and Miss Marple was close to pulling it into the light. Today she'd set a trap to catch a killer. Her plan was simple, but bold. She'd return to the manor, gather the household, and announce she'd found a crucial clue. The burned note was real, but she'd let them think she knew more, enough to scare the guilty into a mistake. People under pressure slipped, and Miss Marple was a master at spotting slips. She thought of Grayson's pale face, Lily's tears, Roland's shaky alibi. One of them, or someone they protected, had killed Cornelius Hargrove, and the fireplace was the key. Cherry burst in, her apron speckled with jam. "Miss Marple, the village is wild. The grocer says you've got Grayson cornered, and the baker heard Lily's been sneaking notes. Everyone's saying you'll solve it by supper." Miss Marple smiled, closing her notebook. "Supper might be ambitious, Cherry, but we're getting close. Have you heard anything new about Roland or the broker?" Cherry plopped into a chair, her eyes bright. "The postman saw Roland at the pub last night, looking nervous, talking to a man in a dark coat, and Mrs. Price swears she heard Grayson mention the broker to someone on the phone, but she couldn't catch more." Miss Marple nodded, her mind ticking. "Nervous, is he? And the broker again. Thank you, Cherry. Keep your ears open, especially about that man in the dark coat." Cherry grinned, dashing off to start chores. Miss Marple tied her scarf, tucked her knitting bag under her arm, and set off for Hargrove Manor. The village was alive with chatter, the air thick with tales of her sleuthing. People leaned over fences, whispering that Miss Marple had found a secret in the fireplace, that she was closing in on the killer. She passed the shop, where Mrs. Price was telling a customer about Grayson's mysterious letters. Miss Marple smiled, letting the gossip swirl. It would help her plan. Fear made people careless. At the manor, Inspector Crane met her at the gate, his face eager but tired. "Morning, Miss Marple. I've got the staff ready in the kitchen, and Rowland's in the drawing-room. Grayson's been jumpy since yesterday. Keeps looking at the door like he wants to run." Miss Marple adjusted her hat, her voice calm. "Good, Inspector. A jumpy man is a talkative one. I'd like everyone in the study this afternoon. Staff, Rowland, anyone else in the house. Tell them I've found something important and I'll explain at 3 o'clock. Crane's eyes widened, his notebook flipping open. "Something important? Have you cracked it?" She smiled, her eyes twinkling. "Not quite, but we're close. Spread the word, but don't say what I've found. Let them wonder. And keep an eye on Grayson. He's the key." Crane nodded, scribbling furiously. "I'll make it happen. Anything else?" Miss Marple tilted her head. "Yes, have Lily sweep the fireplace again, right before we meet. I want to see if anything else turns up." They walked through the manor's dim halls, the air heavy with polish and secrets. Miss Marple stopped by the study first, wanting one last look before her trap. The room was unchanged. Cluttered desk, tipped chair, bolted windows. The faint cigar smoke lingered, sharp and bitter. She went straight to the fireplace, crouching to study the hearth. The ash was still there, fine and powdery, with no new scraps. She peered up the chimney, her fingers brushing the hidden ledge. It was empty, but its presence nagged at her. Why build a ledge in a chimney? To hide something, she was sure. Something small like a gun. She stood, her gaze falling on the scuff mark by the hearth. It was faint, just a smudge of dirt and ash, but it screamed of carelessness. Someone had stood there, maybe in a panic, tracking ash from the fireplace. She pictured the night of the murder. Hargrove at his desk, a shot ringing out, the killer vanishing. The locked door and windows said no one had entered, but the fireplace told a different story. Miss Marple pulled out her notebook, sketching the fireplace and ledge. She added a note. "Scuff, killer's mistake, ledge, hiding place." Her pencil paused as she thought of Grayson's words. No one must know. He was protecting someone or something, and the burned note tied him to it. She tucked the notebook away, her heart quickening. The trap was set, and the truth was close. Crane led her to the kitchen, where Lily was sweeping the hearth as instructed. The girl's hands shook, her eyes darting to Miss Marple. I'm almost done, miss," she stammered, brushing ash into a pile. Miss Marple settled into a chair, pulling out her knitting. "Take your time, dear. I'm just here to watch. Find anything interesting?" Lily shook her head, her cheeks pink. "No, miss, just ash, same as before." Miss Marple's needles clicked, her gaze sharp. She watched every move, but no new scraps appeared. Still, Lily's nerves were a clue in themselves. The girl knew something, even if she didn't realize it. Miss Marple smiled, tucking her knitting away. "Thank you, Lily. You've been very helpful." She found Crane in the hall, his face eager. "Anything, Miss Marple?" She nodded, her voice low. "Lily's scared, and that's enough for now. Make sure everyone's in the study at 3, and tell your men to watch the doors. Someone might try to slip away." Crane saluted, hurrying off to arrange things. Miss Marple spent the morning in the village, letting the gossip spread. She stopped at the shop, buying a tin of biscuits, and chatting with Mrs. Price. "I hear you're solving that murder, Miss Marple," Mrs. Price said, her eyes wide. "Found something big, have you?" Miss Marple smiled, her voice mild. "Just a few threads, Mrs. Price. But threads make a tapestry, don't they?" She left the shop, knowing her words would spread like wildfire. By noon, the village was buzzing that Miss Marple had cracked the case, that she was about to name the killer. Perfect, she thought. Let the guilty sweat. At 3 o'clock she returned to the manor, her knitting bag under her arm. The study was crowded. Roland slouched in a chair, his cigarette smouldering. Grayson stood by the door, his face pale. Mrs. Platt fidgeted with her apron. Lily clutched a duster, her eyes red. Crane and 2 constables stood at the back, their notebooks ready. The air was thick, every face tense with expectation. Miss Marple stood by the fireplace, holding the singed pay-now scrap in her hand. She raised it, her voice clear. "Thank you all for coming. I found something important, a clue that unlocks this mystery. This note was burned in this fireplace, but it survived to tell a story. It says, 'Pay now,' and it was meant for Mr. Hargrove. Someone in this house knows who wrote it." Grayson's hands twitched, his eyes darting to the door. Roland stubbed out his cigarette, his jaw tight. Lily bit her lip, tears welling. Mrs. Platt gasped, her hand to her mouth. Miss Marple watched them all, her gaze steady. "The killer thought a locked room would hide them," she continued. "But they left traces, ash, a scuff, a secret. Mr. Grayson, you burned something here, didn't you? Not just this note, but something bigger. The weapon, perhaps. Grayson's face went white, his voice a rasp. "You're wrong, miss. I wouldn't." Miss Marple's smile was gentle, but her eyes were sharp. "Then tell me, Mr. Grayson, what did you mean by 'no one must know'? I heard you the night Lily passed you a note. What was it? Another demand from the broker?" Grayson staggered back, his hand grabbing the doorframe. I can't. You don't understand." He turned, bolting for the hall. But Crane's constables were faster. They grabbed him, pinning his arms as he struggled. Crane stepped forward, his voice firm. "That's enough, Grayson. You're coming with us." Miss Marple raised a hand, her voice calm. "Let him speak, Inspector. He's not the killer, not yet, but he knows who is." Grayson sagged, his fight gone. "It wasn't me," he whispered. "I swear it. I burned the gun, yes, but I didn't shoot him. It was the broker's orders. He made me do it." The room erupted. Roland cursed. Mrs. Platt gasped. Lily sobbed. Miss Marple stood still, her heart racing. The trap had worked, but the truth was bigger than she'd expected. She looked at Grayson, her voice soft. "Tell us everything, Mr. Grayson. It's time." The constables led Grayson to a chair, his face ashen. Miss Marple glanced at the fireplace, the scuff mark, the ash. The puzzle was falling into place, and the killer's shadow was shrinking. She felt the thrill of the chase, knowing the final pieces were close. Chapter 8. The Truth Unravelled. The air in Hargrove Manor's study was thick with tension, the kind that makes your skin prickle. Miss Jane Marple stood by the fireplace, her small figure steady as a rock despite the chaos around her. Grayson, the butler, slumped in a chair, his face pale as milk, flanked by 2 constables. Roland Hargrove leaned against the desk, his cigarette forgotten, his eyes wide with shock. Mrs. Platt clutched her apron, her breath hitching, while Lily sobbed quietly, her duster crumpled in her hands. Inspector Crane hovered nearby, his notebook open, pencil poised. Miss Marple's trap had sprung, and Grayson's confession had cracked the mystery wide open. Now she needed the whole truth. She held the singed pay-now scrap, its smudged ink a silent witness to the crime. Her voice was calm, almost gentle as she looked at Grayson. "Mr. Grayson, you said you burned the gun on the broker's orders. That's a heavy burden to carry. Tell us everything, how it happened, why you did it. The truth is the only way out now." Grayson's hands trembled, his eyes darting to the door as if he still hoped to run. But the constable's firm grips kept him rooted. He swallowed hard, his voice low and shaky. "I didn't want to, miss. You have to believe me. I've served Mr. Hargrove for years, loyal as they come. But the broker, he's not someone you say no to." Miss Marple nodded, her knitting bag resting on the desk. She didn't pull out her needles. There was no need to soothe anyone now. The room was raw, emotions spilling like water from a broken jug. "Who is the broker, Mr. Grayson? And why did he want Mr. Hargrove dead?" Grayson's shoulders sagged, his voice barely above a whisper. "He's a shadow, miss, a man who lends money to desperate folks, gamblers, businessmen, anyone in a hole. He doesn't show his face, just sends notes in black ink. I owed him years back for a debt I couldn't pay. He never let me forget it. Said I'd work it, off doing his bidding." Roland snorted, his voice sharp. "You're saying this broker made you kill Uncle Cornelius? That's a coward's excuse." Grayson's head snapped up, his eyes flashing. "I didn't kill him. I swear it. I set it up, that's all. The broker sent a note, pay now or else." Mr. Hargrove wouldn't pay. He was stubborn, said he'd expose the broker instead. That's when the orders came. Miss Marple tilted her head, her eyes sharp. "Orders to kill him? How did you do it, Mr. Grayson? The room was locked, the windows bolted, Ascot hat. The gun vanished. Tell us." Grayson rubbed his face, his voice hoarse. "It was a trick, miss. A small pistol rigged in the fireplace. There's a vent hidden behind the bricks, leads to the outside. I fixed the gun there, tied to a string. I pulled it from the garden, through the vent. The shot went straight through Mr. Hargrove. Then I burned the gun in the fireplace, let the ashes fall. Thought no one would find it." The room went silent, every face stunned. Crane's pencil scratched furiously, his eyes wide. Mrs. Platt gasped, crossing herself. Lily's sobs grew louder, her hands covering her face. Roland stared at Grayson, his jaw tight. "You miserable snake! You killed him for some loan shark?" Miss Marple raised a hand, her voice calm. Not so fast, Mr. Hargrove. Mr. Grayson says he didn't pull the trigger. He set the trap. But someone gave the order. The broker. And you, Mr. Hargrove, know more about him than you've let on. Roland's face paled, his cigarette dropping to the carpet. Me? You're mad, old lady. I was in London, I told you. Miss Marple's gaze was steady, piercing. Your alibi is shaky, Mr. Hargrove. A barmaid who might be bribed, a club full of noise. And you flinched when I mentioned the broker. You owe him money, don't you? A gambling debt, perhaps? Roland's hands clenched, his voice rising. So what if I do? Half of London owes someone. Doesn't mean I had my uncle killed. Miss Marple stepped closer, her small frame suddenly commanding. But it means you had a reason, Mr. Hargrove. An inheritance would clear your debts, wouldn't it? Did you tip off the broker? Tell him Mr. Hargrove wouldn't pay? Roland's mouth opened, then closed, his eyes darting to the door. Crane nodded to a constable, who moved to block it. Miss Marple continued, her voice soft but relentless. The fireplace was clever, Mr. Grayson. The vent, the string, the burned gun. But you left traces, the scuff mark where you stood, the ash that wasn't from wood, the note you couldn't fully burn. And Lily saw you, didn't she? Passing notes for the broker, keeping his secrets. Lily whimpered, nodding through her tears. I didn't know, miss. I thought it was just messages. Grayson made me, said it was for Mr. Hargrove. Grayson hung his head, his voice broken. I'm sorry, Lily. I had no choice. The broker, he'd have killed me, my family. He's got eyes everywhere. Crane stepped forward, his voice firm. That's enough, Grayson. You're under arrest for murder and conspiracy. We'll find this broker. Don't you worry. He turned to the constables. Take him to the station and keep an eye on Mr. Hargrove. He's not going anywhere till we check his alibi. The constables hauled Grayson up, his legs wobbly as they led him out. Roland slumped against the desk, lighting another cigarette with shaking hands. Mrs. Platt sank into a chair, muttering prayers. Lily wiped her eyes, clutching her duster like a lifeline. Miss Marple stood by the fireplace, the pay now, scrap still in her hand. She looked at the scuff mark, the hearth, the hidden vent she hadn't seen but now understood. It was so simple, so human. A desperate man, a ruthless lender, a clever trick. Crane turned to her, his face awed. Miss Marple, you've done it again. A locked room, a missing gun, and you unravelled it like a ball of yarn. How do you know? She smiled, tucking the scrap into her handbag. People underestimate the simplicity of evil, Inspector. A debt, a desperate man, a hidden vent, that's all it took. The fireplace told the story, if you listened. The ash wasn't right, the scuff was careless, and Grayson's fear gave him away. Crane shook his head, grinning. You're a wonder, ma'am. We'd have called it a ghost and closed the case without you. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. Ghosts don't leave footprints, Inspector. People do. Now, you'd best check that vent and track down the broker. He's the root of this. Crane nodded, already barking orders to his men. We'll tear this place apart, and I'll have Scotland Yard on the broker by morning. He won't slip away. Miss Marple glanced around the study. Its heavy curtains and cluttered desk now just a room, not a mystery. She thought of Cornelius Hargrove, stubborn and secretive, undone by his own debts. She thought of Grayson, trapped by fear, and Roland tangled in greed. The manor felt lighter, as if its secrets had been aired out like old laundry. Mrs. Platt stood, her voice shaky. "Miss Marple, will it be safe now? No more killing?" Miss Marple patted her arm, her smile kind. "Safer, Mrs. Platt. The truth cleans things up like a good scrub. Stay with Lily. She'll need a friend." Lily looked up, her eyes red but grateful. "Thank you, miss. I was so scared, but you made it right." Miss Marple nodded, her heart warm. "You did the right thing, dear, telling the truth. That's what matters." She turned to Crane, adjusting her scarf. "I'll leave the rest to you, Inspector. I've a scarf to finish and a garden to tend, but do let me know about the broker. I'm curious." Crane laughed, tipping his hat. "You'll be the first, Miss Marple. I owe you a dozen teas for this." She smiled, stepping into the hall. The manor's gloom was lifting, sunlight sneaking through the windows. She walked to the gate, her knitting bag under her arm, the village spreading out below. St. Mary Mead was buzzing, the gossip already twisting her victory into legend. She heard snippets as she passed. Miss Marple caught the killer, found a gun in the fireplace, tricked the butler into confessing. She smiled to herself, letting the chatter fade. The puzzle was solved, the truth laid bare. Grayson would face justice, Roland's lies would unravel, and the broker, well, he'd meet his match soon enough. Miss Marple felt the familiar satisfaction of a job done right, like finishing a perfect row of stitches. As she reached her cottage, Cherry ran out, her face alight. "Miss Marple, they're saying you solved it. Grayson's arrested, and the manor's safe. Tell me everything." Miss Marple chuckled, opening her gate. "Over tea, Cherry. It's a long story, and I'm parched. But first, fetch my knitting. I've a scarf to finish." Cherry dashed inside, and Miss Marple paused, looking back at the manor's distant silhouette. The case was closed, but life went on, gardens to weed, scarves to knit, and sooner or later another mystery. She smiled, her eyes bright. St. Mary Mead was never dull for long. Chapter 9. The Village Settles. The morning sun rose gently over St. Mary Mead, its golden light softening the edges of the village's thatched roofs and stone walls. The air was fresh, carrying the scent of blooming roses and freshly baked bread. Miss Jane Marple sat in her cosy sitting room, her knitting needles clicking as she worked on a soft blue scarf. The Hargrove case was solved, Grayson's confession still echoing in her mind. The manor's secrets had been laid bare, and the village was slowly returning to its quiet rhythm. But Miss Marple knew peace was fragile, and she kept her ears open for the whispers that always followed a storm. Her cottage was warm, the fire crackling softly. She sipped tea, her notebook closed on the table. The sketches of Hargrove's study, fireplace, scuff mark, hidden vent, were no longer needed, but she hadn't put them away. They were a reminder of how close the truth had been, hidden in ash and fear. Grayson was in custody, facing charges for his role in the murder. Roland was under scrutiny, his alibi crumbling as Scotland Yard dug into his debts. The broker, that shadowy figure, was still out there, but Miss Marple trusted Crane to chase him down. For now, St. Mary Mead was safe, and that was enough. Cherry burst in, her curls bouncing under her cap. "Miss Marple, the village is buzzing. Everyone's talking about you." Mrs. Price says you're a hero. Catching Grayson like that. The baker heard Scotland Yard's coming to thank you, and the postman says Rowland's packing to leave. Miss Marple smiled, setting her tea down. A hero, Cherry? That's kind, but I just followed the threads. What else are people saying? Anything about Lily or Mrs. Platt? Cherry plopped into a chair, her eyes bright. Oh, plenty. The grocer saw Lily at the market, looking happier, like a weight's off her. Mrs. Platt's telling everyone she's staying at the manor till it's sold, but she's baking extra pies to calm her nerves. And the vicar says Rowland's been at the pub, drinking too much and muttering about bad luck. Miss Marple nodded, her needles steady. Bad luck, is it? More like bad choices. Keep listening, Cherry. I'd like to know if Rowland mentions the broker again. Cherry grinned, jumping up. I'm on it. I'll ask at the shop and the post office. Oh, it's like a story, isn't it? You're the clever detective. She dashed off, leaving Miss Marple chuckling. Miss Marple finished her tea and tied her scarf, deciding to visit the manor one last time. She wanted to see Lily and Mrs. Platt, to make sure they were settling after the shock. Her knitting bag under her arm, she stepped into the village, where the air was thick with gossip. People waved as she passed, their smiles warm but curious. The shop was crowded, Mrs. Price holding court with tales of Miss Marple's triumph. She outsmarted that butler, she did. Found a gun in the ashes. Miss Marple smiled, buying a easier tin of biscuits and letting the chatter wash over her. Truth mixed with fancy, but it all helped paint the picture. The manor's gate creaked as she pushed it open, the stone walls less forbidding in the sunlight. Inspector Crane was there, directing constables as they searched the garden for more clues. His face lit up when he saw her. Miss Marple, I was going to visit you later. You've saved us again, ma'am. Scotland Yard's impressed. Say it's the cleverest solving they've seen in years. Miss Marple waved a hand, her smile gentle. Nonsense, Inspector. I just noticed what was there. How's Grayson holding up? And have you found anything on the broker? Crane's grin faded, his voice low. Grayson's talking, bit by bit. Says the broker works through middlemen, never shows his face. We've got leads in London tracking those black ink notes. As for Grayson, he's broken. Keeps saying he had no choice. I almost feel sorry for him. Miss Marple nodded, her eyes sharp. Fear makes people do terrible things, Inspector. And Rowland, is he still here? Crane pointed to the drawing-room window, where a shadow moved. Aye, he's inside, packing. His alibi's falling apart. Sally at the Red Lion says she barely saw him that night. We're watching him close. If he's tied to the broker, we'll know soon. Miss Marple tilted her head, her mind ticking. Good. Keep an eye on him. I'd like to see Lily and Mrs. Platt now, if they're about. Crane led her to the kitchen, where the smell of warm scones filled the air. Mrs. Platt was at the stove, her cheeks flushed from the heat. Lily sat at the table, mending a torn apron, her face calmer than before. They looked up as Miss Marple entered, their eyes grateful but weary. Miss Marple, Mrs. Platt exclaimed, wiping her hands. You're a blessing to this house. Sit. I'll get tea. Lily, fetch the good cups. Lily jumped up, her smile shy. Yes, ma'am. She moved with less fear, Miss Marple noted, as if the truth had lifted a shadow. Miss Marple settled into a chair, her knitting bag on her lap. You're both looking better, she said, her voice kind. It's been a hard week, hasn't it? Mrs. Platt nodded, pouring tea. Hard's the word, miss. I still can't believe Grayson did it. Rigging that gun, burning it like that. He was always so proper. And poor Mr. Hargrove, killed over some debt." Lily set the cups down, her voice soft. "I'm sorry I didn't tell sooner, miss. I was scared, with Grayson and those notes, but you made it right." Miss Marple patted her hand, her smile warm. "You were brave, Lily, telling the truth. That's what counts. What will you do now? Stay on here." Lily bit her lip, her eyes bright. "Mrs. Platt's teaching me to cook. I want to learn proper, maybe work in a big house some day. I don't want to be scared any more." Mrs. Platt beamed, passing a scone. "She's a quick learner, miss, and I'm staying till the manor's sold. Someone's got to keep it tidy." Miss Marple nodded, sipping her tea. "You're both strong, and that's what matters. The manor will be fine with you here. Have you seen Roland today? He's leaving, I hear." Mrs. Platt's face soured. "Aye, he's been stomping about, packing his fancy suits. Came in here an hour ago, asking for brandy. Looked like he hadn't slept, all pale and twitchy." Lily nodded, her voice low. "He was muttering, miss. Something about fixing it and no more debts. I didn't like his eyes. They were wild." Miss Marple's needles paused, though she hadn't started knitting. "Wild, you say? Interesting. Thank you both. You've been a great help." She stood, tucking her bag under her arm, and found Crane outside. "Inspector, I'd like a quick word with Roland before I go. Those wild eyes worry me." Crane led her to the drawing-room, where Roland was stuffing papers into a suitcase. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair mussed, a half-empty brandy glass on the table. He looked up, his smile forced. "Miss Marple, back to poke at me? I'm leaving, so you'll have to find another suspect." Miss Marple settled into a chair, her gaze steady. "I'm not here to poke, Mr. Hargrove, but I hear you're upset, talking about debts and fixing things. Care to explain?" Roland's hand shook, spilling brandy. "Village gossip, is it? I'm fine, just tired of this dreary place. Uncle's dead, Grayson's locked up, and I'm stuck sorting his mess. That's all." Miss Marple tilted her head, her voice soft. "A mess, yes. Like your debts to the broker? I know you're scared, Mr. Hargrove. Running won't help. Tell the inspector what you know. It's safer than facing the broker alone." Roland's face crumpled, his voice breaking. "You don't get it, do you? He's everywhere. I borrowed. Money, yes, but I didn't know he'd kill Uncle. I told him Uncle wouldn't pay, that's all. I didn't mean for this." Crane stepped forward, his voice firm. "That's enough, Mr. Hargrove. You're coming with us to answer some questions. If you're tied to the broker, you'd better start talking." Roland sagged, nodding weakly. "All right. I'll tell you what I know. Just keep him away from me." Miss Marple stood, her heart heavy but satisfied. Roland's confession was another thread tied off. She left the drawing-room, the manor's air lighter now, as if its ghosts had fled. Outside, the village spread below, its chatter softer but still alive. She walked home, passing the shop where Mrs. Price was telling a customer that Miss Marple had saved the manor. The baker waved, calling out, "Well done, Miss Marple!" She smiled, waving back, her mind already turning to her garden and her knitting. At her cottage, Cherry was waiting, her face alight. "Miss Marple, they're saying Roland's confessed. Did you do it? Is it over?" Miss Marple chuckled, hanging her scarf. It's over for now, Cherry. Roland's talking, Grayson's caught, and the manor's safe. Fetch the tea, dear. I've earned a cup. Cherry dashed off, and Miss Marple settled by the fire, her needles clicking again. The scarf was nearly done, its blue stitches neat and even. She thought of Lily, finding courage in the kitchen, and Mrs. Platt baking through her fears. She thought of Roland, undone by greed, and Grayson, trapped by desperation. The broker was still out there, but Crane was on his trail, and Miss Marple trusted justice to find him. The village settled into its old rhythm, the gossip fading like morning mist. By evening, people were talking about the vicar's new sermon, or the baker's fresh rolls, the Hargrove case already a story to tell over tea. Miss Marple listened through her window, her smile quiet but content. St. Mary Mead was hers again, peaceful and familiar, ready for whatever mystery came next. Chapter 10. A quiet reflection. Spring bloomed across St. Mary Mead, dressing the village in a riot of colours, pink roses, yellow daffodils, and the tender green of new leaves. The air was sweet with blossom and the promise of warmer days. Miss Jane Marple sat in her garden, a wicker chair creaking under her slight frame. Her knitting lay folded in her lap, the blue scarf finished and tucked away for next winter. A cup of tea steamed on the table beside her, its warmth a comfort against the morning's gentle chill. The Hargrove case was behind her, its knot of secrets untangled, but her mind lingered on it, turning over the lessons like pebbles in a stream. The village had settled into its familiar rhythm, the frenzy of Cornelius Hargrove's murder fading into a story told over tea or at the pub. Grayson was in a cell, awaiting trial for his role in the killing, his confession a weight he'd carry forever. Roland had left St. Mary Mead, his charm tarnished by his ties to the broker, though Inspector Crane assured Miss Marple that Scotland Yard was closing in on the shadowy lender. Lily and Mrs. Platt were still at the manor, keeping it tidy until a buyer came, their spirits lifted by the truth's cleansing light. The manor itself stood quieter now, its stone walls no longer whispering of death. Miss Marple sipped her tea, her sharp blue eyes scanning the garden. The roses needed pruning, and the lavender was spreading too wild, but she was in no hurry. Solving a murder left a kind of stillness, a moment to breathe before life's next puzzle. She thought of the study, its locked door, bolted windows, and that clever fireplace with its hidden vent. The clues had been small, a scuff mark, a scrap of burnt paper, a trace of ash. Yet they'd told a story of greed, fear, and desperation, as human as any tale in St. Mary Mead. Cherry bustled out, her apron dusted with flour from morning baking. Miss Marple, you're up early. The village is still talking about you, you know. Mrs. Price says you're sharper than Sherlock Holmes, and the vicar's wife wants to name a rose after you. Oh, and I saw Lily at the market. She's learning to make scones, says Mrs. Platt's teaching her everything. Miss Marple smiled, setting her cup down. A rose, Cherry? That's far too grand. But I'm glad for Lily. She's finding her way. Any news of Roland or the broker? Cherry perched on the garden wall, her curls bouncing. The postman heard. Roland's in London under watch. Scotland Yard's asking him about the broker, but he's not talking much. And the baker says Inspector Crane got a big letter from the Yard. Something about a raid on a gambling den. Might be the broker's hideout. Miss Marple nodded, her eyes twinkling. "A raid, is it? Good. The broker's time is coming. Keep your ears open, Cherry. I'd like to know how it ends." Cherry grinned, hopping down. "I'm on it. Oh, and the grocer says Mrs. Platt's pies are better than ever. She's baking for the whole village now. I'll fetch more tea, shall I?" She dashed inside, leaving Miss Marple to her thoughts. The garden was quiet, save for the hum of bees and the rustle of leaves. Miss Marple leaned back, her hands resting on her knitting. She pictured the manor study, replaying the case in her mind. It had seemed impossible. A man shot in a locked room, no gun, no way in or out. The village had spun tales of ghosts and curses, but Miss Marple knew better. Evil was rarely supernatural. It was human, born of simple things like debt and fear. Grayson's rigged pistol, hidden in the fireplace vent, was a clever trick. But his mistakes, ash, a scuff, a half-burned note, had betrayed him. People always left traces if you looked closely enough. She thought of Grayson, his stiff pride crumbling under her questions. Fear had driven him, fear of the broker, and a debt he couldn't escape. She felt a pang of pity. He'd been a loyal servant once, twisted by desperation. Roland, too, was a victim of his own making, his gambling debts pulling him into the broker's web. Miss Marple wondered if he'd learn from it, or if London's bright lights would lure him back to ruin. People rarely changed, but hope was stubborn, and she held a sliver for him. Lily and Mrs. Platt were different. Lily's courage in confessing her part, passing notes for Grayson, had freed her from fear. Mrs. Platt's steady hands, kneading dough through the chaos, had kept the manor grounded. Miss Marple smiled, picturing them in the kitchen, scones baking and laughter rising. They'd carry on, stronger for it, and that was a victory as real as catching a killer. The village itself was healing, its gossip softening into pride. Miss Marple had heard the whispers as she walked to the shop yesterday. Miss Marple solved it. Caught that butler red-handed. No one fools her. She didn't mind the praise, though she'd never seek it. Her reward was the quiet, the knowledge that St. Mary Mead was safe, its secrets aired like fresh laundry. The manor's shadow no longer loomed. It was just a house again, waiting for new stories. A knock at the gate broke her thoughts. Inspector Crane stood there, his hat in hand, his face bright with news. "Morning, Miss Marple," he called, stepping into the garden. "Hope I'm not interrupting. I've got something to tell you." Miss Marple waved him to a chair, her smile warm. "Not at all, Inspector. Sit, have some tea. Cherry's just fetching more. What's the news?" Crane settled down, his notebook bulging with papers. "It's the broker, ma'am. Scotland Yard raided a gambling den in London last night, based on Roland's tips. Found a stash of black ink notes, just like the ones Grayson got. They've got a name now. A man called Vincent Cole. Runs half the city's loans. He's not in custody yet, but they're close." Miss Marple's eyes gleamed, her voice soft. "Vincent Cole, is it? That's a start. And Roland, is he helping?" Crane nodded, grinning. "Singing like a bird, ma'am. Says he's done with gambling, wants a clean slate. I don't know if he means it, but he's given us enough to shake the broker's network. We owe you for that. If you hadn't pushed him, he'd still be lying." Miss Marple waved a hand, her smile gentle. "I just asked questions, Inspector. People answer when they're ready. How's Grayson?" Crane's grin faded, his voice low, quiet mostly. He's pleaded guilty, knows he's done for, says he's sorry for what it's worth. I think he means it, but it doesn't change what he did. Miss Marple nodded, her heart heavy. No, it doesn't. But it's a lesson, Inspector. Fear builds cages, and desperation locks them. Keep us posted on the broker. I'd like to know when he's caught. Crane stood, tipping his hat. You'll be the first, ma'am. And if you ever want a job with the yard, just say the word. Miss Marple laughed, a soft, clear sound. I'm happy here, Inspector, with my roses and my knitting. But I'll always have tea ready if you need me. Crane left, his steps lighter, and Cherry returned with a fresh teapot. Was that the Inspector? What did he say? She asked, pouring a cup. Miss Marple took the tea, her smile warm. Good news, Cherry. They're closing in on the broker, and Roland's helping. The village can rest easy now. Cherry clapped, her eyes wide. You did it, Miss Marple. You're like a storybook hero, solving murders and saving the day. Miss Marple chuckled, sipping her tea. No hero, dear, just an old lady who notices things. Now, help me with the roses later. They're getting wild. Cherry nodded, dashing off to finish chores. Miss Marple leaned back, her eyes on the garden. The roses swayed in the breeze, their petals bright against the green. She thought of the Hargrove case, its twists and turns like a tangled skein of wool. It had started with a locked room, a dead man, and a village full of fear. Ended with truth, simple and stark. A debt, a rigged gun, a butler's betrayal. The impossible was just human, as it always was. She thought of St. Mary Mead, its cottages and lanes, its people and their stories. The village was her home, its pulse as familiar as her own. She knew its secrets, its kindnesses, its flaws. The Hargrove case was one chapter, but there'd be others, missing jewels, stolen letters, perhaps another murder. Miss Marple was ready, her mind sharp, her heart steady. Mysteries were like weeds. They kept growing, and she'd keep pulling them out. The sun climbed higher, warming the garden. Miss Marple stood brushing her skirt and picked up her pruning shears. The roses needed her, and the lavender too. She'd knit later, maybe start a new scarf for Cherry. Life went on, quiet but never dull, and St. Mary Mead would always have a place for her watchful eyes. As she clipped a wilted bloom, she heard laughter from the lane, children playing, their voices bright. The village was alive, its heart beating strong. Miss Marple smiled, her shears snipping in rhythm. The Hargrove case was done, the broker's shadow fading. For now, she'd tend her garden, sip her tea, and wait. The next mystery would come, as it always did, and she'd be ready with her needles and her quiet, unyielding gaze.